Hello and welcome to the Federal. With the US imposing a 26% tariff on Indian imports, New Delhi faces mounting pressure to respond. How significant is this move and what does it mean for India's economy and trade strategy? We speak with an expert, TK Arun, now to break down the impact and possible countermeasures. So, thank you for joining. My first question is what is the immediate economic impact of these tariffs on Indian exports?
See, let's understand first that it's not just tariffs on India. Trump has levied tariffs across the board on all countries. At the same time, he has exempted certain categories, including pharmaceuticals, which are vital for India's economy. So, the first casualty of the Trump tariffs is a global trading system. We have the system of most favored nation status, which means that if you levy a particular tariff on one country, you cannot levy a higher tariff on any other country. Now he has blown this to smithereens. So the entire world trade system, to the WTO and its associated rules and practices are at risk. And this will harm all countries, including India. Secondly, the tariffs that matter for India are not just the tariffs on Indian exports. Tariffs on other country exports also matter immensely. For example, it has levied 25% tariffs on imports on steel, right? Which means that China, which has been a major exporter of steel to the US, will now need to find alternate markets, and that could include India. So India might be flooded with imports of steel from China. So, which means that it is not just the direct effect of import tariffs on Indian exports that matter, but the indirect impacts of the US tariffs on other countries and how they affect their trading behavior. And one more thing, how this matters is that in the normal course, if you levy an import duty on a particular product, its price goes up a single time, right? So in the short term, it is inflation, but that's it. But next year, since you won't increase the price by adding a tariff, there is no impact on inflation. However, in Trump's case, he is keeping on changing and chopping the tariffs he announces and other economic policies as well, which means there is a heightened level of uncertainty. And this might actually create persistent inflation. And persistent inflation in the US might induce the US Fed to increase their monetary policy targets, their variables, the federal rates, funding rates. In which case, it will have a monetary impact on the rest of the world, including on India. And India might be compelled to raise tariffs, also see great depreciation of the rupee. So these are all multiple problems inherent in the tariffs imposed by the US. And it's not just a question of how India's exports will be affected by these tariffs levied on Indian exports. Let's understand one thing. These tariffs are levied across the board, right? Which means if India is exporting a particular product because of a certain comparative advantage Indian producers have, and the price goes up, then there are two possible effects. One, because of the increase in price, US consumers or the buyers of these products in the US cut down on their purchases, and that affects India adversely. Secondly, or it could happen that these purchases are absolutely essential. They'll continue to buy and they'll look for alternative sources of imports. India is facing 26% tariff. Can they buy it from somewhere else where it is cheaper because the tariffs are lower? However, since tariffs have been raised across the board, you will find that they might find it difficult to get source this import from any other country. In which case, if it is an import that is non-elastic related to price, which means because the price goes up, the import demand will not go down, then Indian exports will continue. Now, this would have applied in the case of pharma, but pharma is exempt from this tariff escalation in any case. So, what I'm saying, which product will be affected will depend upon how competing products end up from other countries. And this we don't know unless it actually plays out. So we have to understand these
So we
from
don't
the
know which
interdependently.
sectors will be affected either, sir. So we don't know which sectors will be affected either.
We don't really know. For example, they have levied tariffs of some 37% on Bangladesh, right? So Bangladesh is a major garment exporter. So and India used to be non-competitive vis-a-vis Bangladeshi exports. Now the tariff impact on Indian garment exports will be lower than the tariff impact on Bangladeshi exports. This actually improves the Indian export competitiveness in the case of garments. So how the entire configuration will play out will remain to be seen. Plus, I mean, this is not the only thing Trump has done. Trump has exempted from the tariffs he has announced on Canada and Mexico all those products which are compliant with the US Mexico Canada free trade agreement. This essentially hidden the pressure from the automobile law. So, which means that automobile components manufactured in Mexico and Canada and automobiles are exempt from the Trump tariffs. So, effectively, he has given preferential treatment to all those products which are covered by the US Mexico Canada trade agreement. So he was given preferential atmosphere for both Mexico and Canada, and they you might actually see more investment moving to these countries.
Okay, so how might the Indian government respond? India has previously cut tariffs and offered trade concessions to ease tensions with the US. Are further concessions likely, or will India take a firmer stance in negotiation?
See, India has been trying to placate the US and stand up to the US as many other countries have. China has talked tough, Mexico and Canada have talked tough, European Union has talked tough. Now, Japan and South Korea, strong geopolitical allies of the US, have also talked tough. India, which claimed to be very friendly at the level of the heads of government and heads of the US government and heads of Indian government, that is Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump level, has not been talking tough at all. And this might seem bad optics from a political point of view, and Modi's strongman image will certainly take a hit. However, it makes rational economic sense for India not to retaliate with higher tariffs on any of the US imports. We import what? We import, say, medical equipment, MRI scan machinery, things like that, or computer chips, uh, all these things from the US. What do we gain by making these things more expensive for Indian hospitals and Indian patients and Indian computer IT workers by levying additional duties on this? We don't. So we should not, wantonly retaliate for the sake of retaliation. We should, as it is during the Modi government, tariff protection levels have gone up, including his own economic advisors like Panagaria have been strongly advocating that we should cut tariffs and bring down our tariff protection level. So we can negotiate and we should negotiate to have lower tariffs against Indian exports. But I don't think we should retaliate by higher export duties just for the sake of showing that we are tough. That would be political posturing harming India's economic interest.
Despite the tariff, some experts argue that India remains resilient, given its domestic demand and diversification efforts. So, does this hurt India's long-term economic growth, or is the impact overstated?
So the US accounts for 13% of the world imports, which is not a small amount, but it's not, nor is it a very large amount. So the US uh, import volumes as a result of these tariffs available to India goes down, then that of course will matter to the Indian exporter, but it's not a disaster. We will have to at the same time withstand the increased penetration of Indian markets by other country exporters whose whose products are being kept away from the US by these tariffs, as I explained earlier. So that we have to worry about. But India can compete, and India should find a way means to compete. We have a great deal of inefficiency in our logistics even now. So we should reduce the cost of logistics, and that will make our products more competitive globally. So there are things India can do to improve our competitiveness and increase the size of the domestic economy. For example, by actually paying people decent wages. The size of the domestic market is determined by what people earn when they work. If you keep their earnings down to the minimum level possible, naturally the market will not be large. So one man's labor cost is another producer's market for his goods and services he produces. So everybody focuses on lowering their own labor costs by keeping wages low. You are shrinking the size of the collective market. So that is something which is actually stupid, and we should prevent by allowing people to spend money by giving them purchasing power by increasing their earnings. So there are various things India can do: better policy management, better investment by the government, better policy to induce private investment in infrastructure, through which India's potential for growth can increase. All this is actually slack in the system. By you exploiting the slack and removing it, we'll be able to grow faster.
Okay. So my last question is, what message does this send about US-India trade relations under Trump?
See, for India, a very important part of relations to the US is our service exports, which have not been affected by these tariffs at all. So, by trying to act tough and create embarrass President Trump, we don't want to engage with help our services export industry, the software and IT services industry, the global capability centers that have been set up in India. We have some 1,700 of these things coming up in India. And even after Trump came to power, we saw McDonald's set up a huge facility in India for their global requirements. And India is actually becoming a major hub of R&D for the biggest companies of the world uh, because of our talent. Now, we don't want to endanger all this by talking tough. At the same time, we need to understand that what Trump is doing might not last beyond the Trump term. This is causing immense pain to US consumers. Their prices are going up, and the expectation that suddenly the world will start manufacturing within the US because of these tariffs is unrealistic, because people don't expect these tariffs to last beyond the 4 years that Trump is president. Why would they invest huge additional capacities? And even if some manufacturing shifted, that will be so capital and technology intensive that will be done by robots and by artificial intelligence algorithm, that you won't create much additional manufacturing employment in the US. So this is bound to disappoint the US supporters of Trump. And I see no reason why he should last, these policies should last beyond this term. So at the same time, right now, there is an opportunity to correct some wrongs that previous US administrators have done to the World Trading Organization. The biggest advantage of the WTO is that it has a dispute settlement mechanism. If there is a dispute between two trading partners, they can go to the WTO, raise the dispute, and if the ruling given in the dispute settlement mechanism is not favorable, it can appeal to an appellate authority. But the US has refused to appoint people to the appellate authority, refused to endorse any appointment. So that body has been rendered toothless, which means the WTO is practically defunct. So this is not good for developing countries like India. So India should join the work with BRICS countries and try to create a mini WTO within the WTO, excluding the US, to bring back the rules-based trading system, to make the WTO dispute settlement mechanism functional. And these tariffs now create that opportunity because the rest of the world is strongly angry at Trump for having done what he has done. So I think these are the kind of things we should do.